Hey guys, Will here, and today I want to talk about button bloat. So Blizzard has mentioned this quite a few times lately, and it's one of the big things they're doing for Warlords of Draenor, is trying to reduce ability or button bloat. For a long time now, they've had to add abilities as we leveled up. Like every new expansion they add a new ability. I think in Pandaria they only added one with level 87, but then there's also talents and things like that. And so every expansion they kind of had to add more abilities because you feel like you increase in power when you get a new ability. Now the real problem with that has been that because they keep adding abilities, that people have to have more keybinds. And it's kind of gotten to the point where everyone just feels like they have too many keybinds, especially rotationally. It's okay to have some situational abilities that you don't necessarily have to bind, but overall, our rotations have gotten kind of bloated. There's a lot of abilities, a lot of cooldowns that we don't really need anymore. And really, they're trying to reduce that because they feel like when you have too many abilities, it's not fun. It's important to note that they're not trying to dumb the game down while they do this. They're really just trying to make things a little bit easier to understand, reduce complexity, but not really reduce depth, if that makes any sense. So let's start out with individual classes. So the Death Knight. Army of the Dead now deals 75% less damage and is only available to Blood Death Knights. So I'd actually like to talk about this one a little bit. This was listed in the patch notes fairly recently, but Celestal later clarified they're actually considering removing this change. Army of the Dead is considered a very iconic ability for all Death Knights, and so removing it from Frost and Unholy doesn't really make a lot of sense. So they actually are heavily considering keeping it for all Death Knights, but instead of making it a channeled spell where you channel it and then it summons the adds over 6 seconds, they're going to make it an instant cast and the adds will summon during that 6 seconds, but you can be in combat while that's happening and you won't have to just sit there and channel. So they're actually changing Army of the Dead for the better, and I don't believe they're actually going to remove it from Frost and Unholy. That's kind of an outdated patch note. Dual Wield is now only available to Frost Death Knights. Not really a big deal. No one really does Unholy or Blood Dual Wield anyway. Horn of Winter no longer generates runic power, has no cooldown, and lasts 1 hour. That's similar to a Glyph already. Basically, they don't want to make it a rotational ability. I believe they did a similar thing with Warrior Shouts. They don't generate your resource anymore, you're not going to use them in combat. Personally, I feel like these abilities should just be buffs anyway. There's no reason to use them in combat. It always felt kind of weird to me. Necrotic Strike is now learned only by Frost and Unholy Death Knights. Again, just kind of reducing the button bloat for these other specs. Raise Dead is now only available to Unholy Death Knights, summons a ghoul as a permanent pet, and has a 1-minute cooldown, and Master of Ghouls has been removed. So they're trying to remove cooldowns, and this was kind of a fairly small cooldown for Blood and Frost, and really it didn't make a lot of sense. Unholy was the pet spec, Unholy should have the ghoul. There wasn't really a reason for Blood or Frost to have a ghoul out every once in a while. So it makes sense that Unholy is the one that gets the ghoul all the time. There's no real temporary ghoul anymore, although Army of the Dead kind of fills that niche. Rune Strike now replaces Death Coil for Blood Death Knights. Frost Strike now replaces Death Coil for Frost Death Knights, and Obliterate now replaces Blood Strike for Frost Death Knights as well. So again, as I said, they're just trying to kind of replace abilities instead of giving you a ton of different ones in your spellbook. Alright, let's move on to Druid. So Enrage for Bear Tanks has been removed. Not a big deal. That's always felt pretty useless anyway, especially during Pandaria. It costs a global cooldown, so no one really wants to use it, and I don't really have an issue with generating Rage as my bear tank anyway, so I don't think it's a big deal. Innervate has been removed. Now this is interesting, because I thought they would remove Innervate not from everyone, but just from Feral or Guardian, but they've actually removed all the mana buttons from all healers, and so mana costs for druids and every other healer have been adjusted accordingly, but they really said that, these mana buttons, they don't really have a lot of gameplay, you just kind of use them after you use a little bit of mana, and you use them on cooldown essentially, and they're not that fun. And that makes sense, although Innervate I always felt was a little bit iconic for druids. I believe back in Vanilla, it was like the final 41-point talent for, might have been Feral, I don't even think it was Resto. And so it was really weird to have Innervate removed because it's been around for so long and it did feel kind of iconic, but it's kind of useless at this point anyway. Mangle for cat form has been removed, and bear form Mangle remains unchanged. The real reason for this is the Shred positional requirement has been removed, and Shred is now available to all druids. So that makes sense. Mangle wouldn't really serve a purpose at that point, it was kind of just used if you couldn't get behind the boss. Swipe in bear form has been removed, Swipe cat form remains unchanged. Now the real reason for this is because Thrash no longer has a cooldown. That's okay. Although people always considered Swipe kind of iconic for bears. I felt like people would always tell you, oh man, you do so much DPS because of Swipe, even though really since Pandaria, Swipe has been pretty garbage. Thrash is just better. Swipe just felt like another button you had to press. So it makes sense to kind of get rid of Swipe and give Thrash no cooldown, and there's other AoE stuff we can do now, so Swipe is kind of just filler at this point. Here's a big one. Symbiosis has been removed. That's different. I mean, that's a level 87 ability. They just added that in Pandaria, but I see why they're removing it. It did cause a lot of button bloat overall for every class. I mean, that was one that everyone kind of just had to bind another ability because of Symbiosis, and a lot of them were useless or not very good in most situations, and it was a fun ability, but it seemed pretty hard to balance, and some of the abilities were just too strong, so I get why they're removing it, but we're all gonna miss it, kind of, because it was fun sometimes. So, Hunter. Arcane Shot is no longer available to marksmanship hunters. Thrill of the Hunt now also reduces the cost of aim shot when active to preserve its value to marksmanship. That makes sense. They want to make sure that Arcane Shot isn't the focus dump for marksman. They want aim shot to be the main focus dump, because they want marksmanship to feel different from beast mastery and survival. So you'll have a long kind of cast time, hard-hitting nuke instead of just these quick, rapid shots with a marksman. Aspect of the Hawk has been removed, because really there was no real point for it anymore. Aspect of the Iron Hawk has been renamed to Iron Hawk, and now passively provides 10% damage reduction. That's the talent. Many pet abilities have been removed or changed. Distracting Shot has been removed. Hunter's Mark has been removed. See, that was always a pretty flavorful ability, but it did kind of just feel like a maintenance buff. It wasn't really that fun to use, but it's always been pretty iconic, so I'm a little bit surprised to see it removed, but I guess I can see it. Kill Shot, no longer available to survival hunters. That's them trying to differentiate the specs again. Lock and Load has been removed, and its effect has been incorporated into Black Arrow, which now has a chance to cause the effect. Consolidating abilities makes sense. Stampede is now a level 75 talent, replacing Lynx Rush, and Lynx Rush has been removed. Now that makes sense to me, because Stampede kind of felt like it just contributed too much to Hunter's Burst, and they already had too many cooldowns, so making that a talent means that they have to pick between other abilities, so that not everyone will have it, and I like that. Rapid Fire has been removed, Rapid Recuperation has been removed, Serpent Sting and Improved Serpent Sting have been removed, although Serpent Spread has been renamed Serpent Sting and remains a passive for survival hunters, and it causes the Serpent Sting poison effect, so that makes sense to kind of put that on survival only. They've always felt like the poisonous or the trap spec, so I like that. Widow Venom has been removed. Man, Hunter's got a lot of removed stuff. Revive Pet and Mend Pet now share one button, which toggles based on whether you have a live pet. That's good. Like, I like that one a lot. Mages. Arcane Barrage now replaces Fire Blast for Arcane Mages. Arcane Blast now replaces Frostfire Bolt for Arcane Mages. Arcane Explosion is now available only to Arcane Mages. So again, a lot of consolidation and individual spec-based things. There's no real reason to have Arcane Explosion if you're another mage spec. You don't really use it. Blizzard is now available only to Frost Mages, and Flame Strike is now available only to Fire Mages. There are really just a lot of changes like that. Like Combustion now replaces Deep Freeze for Fire Mages, and Deep Freeze is now available only to Frost Mages. A lot of these, like, spec replacements, things like that, like Frost Armor is now only available to Frost Mages, Ice Lance is only available to Frost Mages, Mage Armor is Arcane only, Molten Armor is Fire only. Mana Gem has been removed, so that's an interesting thing, because for a long time now, mana management has been a huge deal with Arcane, and removing Mana Gem, I'm interested to see how that affects the rotation overall. Let's move on to Monks. Avert Harm has been removed. Not a big deal, that spell was entirely useless. Clash has been removed. Very situational, it was never really that good anyway. Adaptation has been removed. Power Guard has been removed. Disable is now available only to Windwalker monks. That's removing a little bit of their CC, especially from Brewmaster, but it makes sense. Healing Sphere, the spell, not any other source of the Healing Sphere, has been removed. So the Mistweaver's Gift of the Serpent, Brewmaster's Gift of the Ox, and Windwalker's Afterlife will still summon Healing Spheres. Really, they're just kind of taking that button away to summon one. Nobody really used it anyway, so it makes sense the passive summoning of them was cool, but having actually placed one down always felt like it interrupted combat a bit, especially for Brewmaster or Windwalker. Alright, Paladin. Avenging Wrath is now only available to Rep Paladins, Devotion Aura is no longer available to Protection or Rep Paladins, Divine Plea has been removed, mana costs for Paladins have been adjusted accordingly, Guardian of Ancient Kings is now only available to Protection Paladins. So a little bit of clarification here. They're trying to make it so that Avenging Wrath and Devotion Aura and Guardian of Ancient Kings, they want each of those for one spec. So Avenging Wrath would go to Ret, Devotion Aura would go to Holy, and Guardian of Ancient Kings would go to Prot. Now, they've actually experienced a lot of negative feedback already on this, similar to the Army of the Dead change. Basically, people feel like wings are iconic. It's not so much that the individual abilities are iconic, it's just Avenging Wrath gives you wings, and people want that. So what I think they're going to do is give everyone wings on these abilities. So Avenging Wrath, Paladins will get their wings, Devotion Aura will cause Holy to get their wings, and Guardian of Ancient Kings would give Prot their wings when they use it. So you're not really losing your wings, you're just losing these other abilities, which you don't really care about anyway. I mean, Avenging Wrath, that was the major cooldown for Ret, you still keep that. Devo Aura, they want to make it so that healers are responsible for raids surviving and not tanks or DPS anymore. So removing that from Prot and Ret makes sense to me. And Guardian of Ancient Kings, well, I feel like that should be a protection only cooldown. It's mainly a big, it's a big damage reduction cooldown for personal use. That should be a Prot only thing anyway. Hand of Salvation has been removed. Really, that's because threat is no longer an issue, and no one ever uses that. Holy Light has been removed, but Divine Light has been renamed Holy Light, and Inquisition has been removed. Now, it's important to note this isn't just a 30% damage nerf to Ret. They're actually going to buff your numbers as Ret. Really, that's a design change, not a numbers change. They want to take out the Inquisition self-buff, because a lot of people don't like it. And they actually had a glyph, I believe, that kind of kept it up for you in early MOP beta, but they took that out because it was a DPS loss. I think they've wanted to remove Inquisition for a while. They just didn't know exactly how to do it without just removing it, and here they are, just removing it. Alright, Priest. Binding Heal is no longer available to Shadow Priests. Hymn of Hope has been removed. Heal has been removed. Greater Heal has been renamed Heal. Inner Focus no longer provides any mana cost reduction. Rapture has been removed. Renew is now available only to Holy Priests. Shadow Word Death is now available only to Shadow Priests. Void Shift has been removed. Inner Fire has been removed, and Inner Will has been removed. So a lot of things have been removed. I believe Void Shift was their level 87 ability, so a lot of the 87 abilities were removed because they just kind of contributed to Bloat. They were all fun, but they weren't that useful, or they were very situational. The reason that Hymn of Hope has been removed, again, they're removing the mana button for all healers. So overall, all these removals make sense to me. Alright, Rogue. Disarm Trap has been removed. To me, that doesn't really make sense to remove it. It was always this fun, flavorful ability that was useless, but nobody had it bound, nobody even had it on their bars anymore. I believe the last time it was ever really used was like ICC. But I guess if they don't want to use it anymore, if they never want to have Rogue's Disarm, that makes sense to remove it, but I don't know. To me, I always feel like a Rogue should be able to disarm more traps. I think they should have that around more, but I guess they decided to just totally remove it. Rupture is no longer available to combat rogues, and Shadow Blades has been removed. Again, I believe that was their level 87 ability, so a lot of those are removed. Alright, Shaman. Ancestral Awakening has been removed. Feral Spirit no longer has the Spirit Bite ability. Flame Tongue Weapon is no longer available to Resto. Frostbrand Weapon is now available only to Enhancement. Greater Healing Wave has been renamed to Healing Wave. Healing Tide Totem is now available only to Resto. Now, that's not just to nerf the other specs, it's really because, they want to make Resto the only spec that can really heal people to full. They don't like it when, an elemental shaman drops Healing Tide and the raid is full health again. They want healers to be responsible for the raid's well-being. Healing Wave has been removed. That's because of Greater Healing Wave being renamed to Healing Wave. Magma Totem is now available only to Enhancement. Rock Butter Weapon has been removed. Static Shock has been removed. Stormlash Totem has been removed. Searing Flames has been removed. A lot of removals. Water Shield is now only available to Restoration Shaman and replaces Lightning Shield. Now, one of the biggest changes that actually I don't believe is noted here is that Lightning Bolt is now not castable while moving, which is a pretty big deal for Elemental especially, and a lot of people are complaining about that, but they do have other abilities that they can cast while moving. Casting while moving has definitely been something of a contention point for a lot of players. Blizzard seems to be going back on it. They kind of increased people's ability to cast while moving, mostly during Pandaria, and they've been kind of going back on it. They think that casting while moving should definitely be a penalty overall. They don't want people to do it all the time, and I get that, but it's a little bit less fun. Like, casting while moving is actually fun, so removing it is I believe anti-fun, but it makes sense in their design, I guess. Warlocks. All of the various Soulburn effects are learned together with Soulburn instead of at different levels. Curse of Exhaustion and Curse of the Elements now affects all enemies within 10 yards of the target. Metamorphosis Cursed Auras have been removed. Drain Soul has been removed. Fell Flame has been removed. Health Funnel no longer gains a benefit from Soul Burn. Metamorphosis Void Ray has been removed. Metamorphosis Carrion Swarm has been removed, so a lot of complaints about that. Pyroclasm has been removed. The altered behavior granted for Chaos Bolt is now baseline to Backdraft. Seed of Corruption now replaces Rain of Fire for Affliction Warlocks. Soul Shatter has been removed, and Unending Breath no longer gains a benefit from Soul Burn. Warrior. Battle Shout now lasts 1 hour and no longer generates rage, similar to the Horn of Winter change. Berserker Rage no longer generates rage or increases physical damage dealt. Berserker Stance has been removed. Now I always felt that was pretty iconic, but it makes sense. Cleave has been removed. Whoa, they actually removed Cleave. Like, to me, I don't know, I think they should make it more useful, not remove it, because Cleave is like one of the most iconic abilities. There's a reason so many AoEs are called Cleave. Commanding Shout now lasts 1 hour and no longer generates rage. Demoralizing Banner has been removed. Hamstring is now a passive ability that causes Mortal Strike, Bloodthirst, Revenge, and Raging Blow to also reduce the target's movement speed by 50%. Rallying Cry is no longer available to Protection Warriors. Recklessness is now available only to Fury and Arms Warriors, and Skull Banner has been removed, but they incorporated some of Skull Banner's personal effects into Recklessness. That was just kind of to consolidate those buttons instead of making it so you macro them together. Throw has been removed, but I believe Heroic Throw no longer has a cooldown. Thunderclap is no longer available to Fury Warriors, and Whirlwind is now available only to Fury Warriors. So those were all the individual class changes. Here's some more overall changes, mostly CC stuff. So they removed silence effects from interrupts. Silences still exist, but are never attached to an interrupt. They removed all disarms, and they reduced the number of diminishing returns categories, so all roots now share the same DR category. The exception to that would be the roots on charge type of abilities, but they have a very short duration instead. All stuns now share the same DR. All incapacitate or mesmerize effects now share the same DR and have been merged with the horror DR category. They removed the ability to make cast time CC spells instant with a cooldown, and many CC spells are removed entirely, and they increase the cooldowns and restrictions on others. Pet cast CC is more limited and often removed. Cyclone can now be dispelled by immunities and mass dispel, which is a pretty huge nerf for Cyclone, but it was really overpowered during a lot of Pandaria. PvP trinkets now grant immunity to reapplication of an effect from the same spellcast when they break abilities with persistent effects like Solar Beam. Long Fears are now shorter in PvP. I believe this was 8 seconds, down to 6 seconds, to account for the target also needing to run back afterward. Wow, a lot of changes here today. Anyway, that's all the real news I have today. If you enjoyed the video or found it informative, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.